My wife thought she could treat me that way, but eventually, she regretted it. Let me start from the beginning. The night it finally hit me, she had been treating me like I didn't matter at all in our marriage. That was the night everything changed. I don't mean just realizing it in passing. I mean feeling it deep down, like a punch in the gut, and deciding I was done letting it slide. It was a Tuesday evening, one of those long days where I'd stayed late at work again. You know the feeling. You drag yourself home hoping for a little warmth, some comfort, just a simple connection with the person you vowed to spend your life with. But me? I'd been lying to myself for months, pretending that connection still existed. When I walked through the front door that night, she barely glanced up from her phone. Not a smile, not a word, just a quick flick of her eyes and back to scrolling. That had become normal, but this time, something felt different. This time, I was actually paying attention to what that meant. Later that night, I tried to close the distance between us. Nothing wild, nothing out of line, just the kind of closeness married couples are supposed to share. And you know what I got in return? She rolled her eyes like I'd asked for something ridiculous and muttered that she was too tired. Too tired for me, but not too tired to stay glued to her phone for another hour, texting friends, laughing at whatever was on her screen. And that's when it slammed into me like a freight train. This wasn't new. This had been going on for months. I started counting back in my head, trying to remember the last time she actually wanted me, the last time I didn't feel like I was bothering her just by reaching for her hand. For months. For whole months of cold shoulders, half-baked excuses, and me feeling like some teenage boy begging for scraps of attention from the girl he liked. And the rejection itself? That wasn't even the worst part. What cut deeper was the way she did it. Like I was pathetic for even trying. Like wanting to be close to my own wife was some kind of crime. She'd sigh, roll her eyes, act annoyed, sometimes even laugh under her breath at me. At me, her husband, lying there that night, staring at the ceiling while she slept soundly beside me. I came to a hard truth. This wasn't just about physical rejection. This was about respect, or the lack of it. She had none for me. No desire, no warmth, no basic acknowledgement of who I was as a man. And somehow, I'd been letting that slide as if it was just how marriage goes. But here's what really gnawed at me. During the day, she had no problem expecting everything from me. Fix the faucet, pay the bills, deal with her car issues, listen to her unload about work. She still wanted all the perks of having a husband, but she gave nothing back in return. I was a provider, a handyman, a sounding board, but not a partner. As I lay there, I replayed how this all started. It wasn't some big, dramatic shift. It was slow, creeping in like poison. At first, a rare not tonight. Then, more frequent brush-offs. Eventually, it was routine, something I accepted without protest. Somewhere along the way, I taught her that treating me like nothing came with zero consequences. The next morning, life went on like always. She brewed her coffee, got dressed for work, same routine as every other day. But when she casually mentioned that the bathroom faucet was leaking and I should get to it, something inside me flipped, not into rage, but into pure, cold clarity. I looked at her and said flatly, "Fix it yourself." She laughed at first, thought I was joking. But when she saw my face and realized I meant it, confusion washed over her. She couldn't wrap her head around why the man she'd been ignoring and disrespecting for months suddenly wasn't bending over backward anymore. "What's gotten into you?" she asked. And I almost laughed. What had gotten into me? The truth. The understanding that respect isn't something you plead for. It's something you command by drawing the line. That morning, I made a decision that would change everything. If she wanted to treat me like I was invisible in the bedroom, then I'd show her what being invisible everywhere else really felt like. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg or try to reason with her. I was just going to let my actions do the talking. The game had shifted, and she didn't even know it yet. But she was about to. That night, I realized a brutal truth. People only treat you the way you allow them to. And I'd been allowing disrespect for far too long. That ended right then and there. The change didn't happen overnight, but it started immediately. I kicked off what I call my silent strategy. No drama, no yelling, no long talks that went nowhere. Just a steady, calculated indifference. First step, I stopped trying. No more gestures, no more attempts at closeness, no more fighting to win her attention. If she wanted to pretend I didn't exist in the bedroom, then I'd extend that same energy to the rest of our life. By day 3, she noticed something was different. I came home from work, gave a short hey, and went straight to the garage to work on my car, a project I'd been putting off forever because I was always busy doing things for her. When she called me for dinner, I told her I'd already eaten. Truth was, I hadn't. I just wasn't about to sit across from someone who treated me like a roommate and fake like we were okay. And you know what? Watching her confusion grow was strangely satisfying. She'd gotten so comfortable with me chasing her that my sudden lack of effort threw her completely off balance. When she asked what was wrong, I shrugged and said, nothing, with the same detached tone she'd been giving me for months. By the end of that first week, I'd signed up for a gym membership. Not to get her attention. She'd lost the right to that. But because I realized how much of myself I'd let go while trying to make someone else happy. Every evening, instead of coming home to her cold silence, I went to the gym, burned off the weight of all that frustration, and came home when I felt like it. She started asking questions. Where were you? Why didn't you text me? What's with this new routine? And my answers were calm, short, and honest. At the gym. Didn't think to. Just taking care of myself. The same energy she'd been giving me for months? I was finally giving it right back. The weekend finally showed up, and that's when things really shifted. Normally, my Saturdays were spent like clockwork, me crawling under sinks, patching things up, running errands she tossed my way. But this time, I decided I was done playing handyman. I got up early, made my coffee, and casually said, I'm heading out for a bit. She didn't even look up before asking if I'd grab groceries or swing by the hardware store. She started making a list, like it was just expected. That's when I stopped her and said, no errands today. I'm going to buy some spare parts for the car. She froze, blinked, like she couldn't process what I'd just said. What about everything we need to get done? She asked. I sipped my coffee and shrugged. You're perfectly capable of handling it. And there it was, not hurt, not even confusion, just frustration. Like I'd forgotten my role as her personal assistant. She tried the guilt card next, telling me I was being selfish. My answer was simple. Now you know what that feels like. Week 2 rolled around, and she started realizing this wasn't just me having an off couple of days. I wasn't snapping out of it. I'd changed. When her car started making that weird noise again, she tossed it my way like always, expecting me to handle it. I told her, call a mechanic. When she wanted furniture moved, I reminded her that her brother had 2 good arms. See, I'd been treating her every whim like it was my responsibility for years. But it wasn't. I was her husband, not her hired help. And watching that realization slowly dawn on her was something else. She started noticing other changes too. Like the way I'd smile at my phone, old friends I'd reconnected with from the gym. Or how I started picking up new clothes. Not for her, not for anyone else, just because I felt like it. And what really threw her? I wasn't bitter about any of it. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't sulking. I was calm, distant, almost indifferent. And that was the one thing she couldn't handle. You can argue with anger, you can twist guilt, but you can't control indifference. By week 3, she was trying to reel me back in. Walking around in less clothing, tossing little comments about how distant I'd become, suggesting we curl up and watch a movie. My answers stayed the same, polite, detached. You can watch whatever you want. I'm not distant, I'm just good where I'm at. Thanks, but I've got other plans. For months, she'd treated me like I was invisible. Now she was getting a taste of it herself. And the truth is, I wasn't doing it to hurt her. I was doing it because I'd finally learned to value myself again. I could tell she was asking her friends for advice. Suddenly, she was making little comments about how couples need to communicate or work through rough patches. But respect doesn't come back because you talk about it. Respect has to be earned. And she hadn't even admitted she'd lost mine. By the time we hit the 1-month mark, she was acting different. Not better, just more careful, more watchful, like she was scared of losing control over me. And that fear had nothing to do with love. Month 2 came, and desperation started creeping in. One Wednesday night, I was in the living room reading when she walked in wearing that dress. Every married man knows the one. The dress that once drove you crazy, the one you haven't seen in a year or more. She sat down close, started talking about her day in that soft, flirty voice she hadn't used since we were dating. I looked up, gave her a polite smile, and said, "That's nice, honey." Then I went right back to my book. She sat there for 15 long minutes, waiting for me to bite. When I didn't, she left the room in silence, probably trying to figure out who this version of me was. See, the old me would have dropped everything just because she finally looked my way. But I'd learned something important. Respect isn't a switch you flip when it suits you. You don't get to treat someone like a ghost for months and then expect them to chase you the second you show interest. The real test came that weekend. She suggested we go out to dinner, just the two of us. 3 months ago, I would have jumped at the chance. Now, I had plans with some guys from the gym to watch the game. The look on her face was a mix of disbelief, frustration, and fear. "You're choosing your friends over me?" she asked. And I almost laughed. This woman had been choosing everything over me for months. Her phone, her sleep, her friends, and now she wanted to play the victim. "I'm not choosing anyone over anyone," I said calmly. "I'm just not available tonight." That's when she snapped. "You're acting like a child. This attitude of yours is ridiculous." I set my keys down and met her eyes. "You know what's ridiculous? Thinking you can ignore your husband for months, treat him like a burden, and then expect him to drop everything the moment you finally decide he's worth your time." Her face went pale, like she knew exactly what I was talking about. But instead of owning it, she tried to deny it. "I never ignored you. You're being dramatic." For the first time ever, I didn't let it slide. "Really?" I said. "Because I can tell you exactly how many times you've brushed me off in the past few months. I can tell you how many times you've rolled your eyes when I tried to hold you. I can tell you how many times you've made me feel like a fool just for wanting to be close to my own wife." And for once, she had nothing to say, just silence. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to fill it. She didn't have a comeback this time. The truth was sitting right there between us, heavy as a rock, and we both knew it. She tried to deflect, reaching for the oldest trick in the book. "Well, you never said you felt that way," she argued, trying to twist it into being my fault for not communicating better. I grabbed my keys and looked at her. "You're right," I said calmly. "I should have said something sooner. I should have told you that treating your own husband like he doesn't exist eventually has consequences. Consider this your official notice." And with that, I walked out the door. When I got home later that night, she was waiting up, but not because she was worried. She was fuming. The second I stepped inside, the questions started flying. "Where were you? Who were you with? Why didn't you answer your phone?" I poured myself a glass of water, took my time, and said, "I was exactly where I told you I'd be, with exactly who I said I'd be with." And I didn't answer because, for the first time in months, I was actually enjoying myself. That's when she said it, the line that told me everything I needed to know. "You're being selfish. Marriage is about compromise." I laughed, couldn't help it. "You're absolutely right," I said. "Marriage is about compromise. So tell me, what have you been compromising on? Because from where I'm standing, I've been giving, bending, sacrificing, and you've been taking." She immediately tried to flip it on me. "I compromise all the time," she said, her voice sharp. "I put up with your moods, your work stress, your demands." And that's when my blood ran cold. Demands. She was calling my desire for closeness, for intimacy with my own wife, demands. That was the moment I knew we were past the point of no return. "Demands," I repeated, my voice low but steady. "You mean like wanting to feel wanted in my own home? Like expecting basic respect from the woman I married? Like hoping you'd actually act like you're happy to be my wife?" Each word landed hard. I could see it hitting her, see her shoulders sink just a little. But instead of an apology, instead of the smallest bit of ownership, she went on the defense. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," she snapped. "You don't understand how tired I am." More excuses. More justifications for treating me like a ghost. "You're right," I said finally. "I don't understand. I don't understand how you can be too tired for your husband, but not too tired for your phone. I don't understand how you're too stressed for us, but not too stressed to go out with your friends. I don't understand how you expect me to always be there for you when you're never there for me." She didn't have an answer, just slammed the bedroom door behind her while I stayed on the couch. Not because she kicked me out, but because I chose to. And we both knew what that choice meant. The next morning, a new phase began. Suddenly, she was bargaining. "Maybe we should try counseling. Maybe we need to work on communication." But notice what she didn't say. She didn't say, "I've been treating you like garbage, and I'm sorry." She didn't admit her part in creating this mess. She just wanted to slap a Band-Aid over a wound she didn't even want to acknowledge. I shook my head. I'm not going to counseling with someone who doesn't think they've done anything wrong. When you're ready to admit how you've been treating me, then we can talk. Until then, I'll keep giving you exactly what you've given me." Later that day, she tried a different tactic, cooked my favorite meal, put on music, lit a candle, the whole setup. But romance without respect? That's not love. That's manipulation. I thanked her politely, washed my plate, and went out to the garage to work on my car. That's when it finally started sinking in for her. The man she'd been walking all over was gone, and he wasn't coming back. By month 3, the changes were rippling through every part of our life. She was starting to see what losing me really meant, not just emotionally, but practically. It started small. Her car registration needed to be renewed, something I'd always handled for her. She mentioned it casually, expecting me to take care of it like usual. I looked up from what I was doing and said, "AutoZone, open till 7. You've got time." She stared at me, genuinely confused. "You're not going to take care of it? It's your car," I replied evenly. "You're perfectly capable of handling your own responsibilities." That look on her face, pure shock, told me everything. She had gotten so used to me managing her life that she forgot how to manage it herself. That weekend, her sister called, inviting us to a family barbecue. Normally, I'd drop whatever plans I had, make sure we brought something, show up with a smile. But this time, I didn't even hesitate. "Sounds like fun," I told her. "You should go." She blinked. "Aren't you coming?" "Nope," I said. "I've got plans." "What plans?" she demanded. I joined a hiking group through the gym. Something I've always wanted to do, but never made time for, since I was always busy with your family's events, your errands, your priorities. She looked at me like I'd just spoken another language. "Since when do you choose hiking over family?" I met her eyes and said, "Since I realized your family's never treated me like family, just like an accessory you bring along. Since I understood showing up out of obligation instead of wanting to is just another way I've been letting myself get walked on." The barbecue thing led to our first real fight in months. Not because I was mad, but because she was furious. "You're embarrassing me," she spat. "What am I supposed to tell my family?" I shrugged. "Tell them the truth. Tell them your husband's finally living his own life instead of just existing in yours." That's when she said it, the thing that showed just how entitled she'd become. "This isn't the man I married." And you know what? She was right. "The man you married," I said quietly, "was a pushover. A guy who thought keeping you happy was more important than keeping his own self-respect. A man who would have taken being treated like nothing and said thank you for the scraps." I held her gaze and finished. "You're right. That man's gone. The man you married," I said quietly, "would have begged for scraps of attention. He didn't know his own worth, didn't even realize what self-respect looked like. That man, he's gone for good." She went straight for the guilt trip after that, throwing our wedding vows in my face. "We promised to be there for each other, for better or worse," she said, her voice trembling with practiced innocence. I almost laughed at the irony. "Yeah? And where were you during my worst? Where were you when I needed you to want me, to respect me, to treat me like I mattered?" Funny how those vows only seem to pop into your memory when they're working in your favor. The next week, things escalated. She pulled in reinforcements. Out of nowhere, her mother called me directly, a first in our entire marriage. "What's wrong with you?" she demanded. "Why are you treating my daughter so badly?" I listened politely, let her finish, and then asked one simple question. "Has your daughter told you how she's been treating me?" The silence that followed was louder than anything she could have said. I already knew the answer. My wife hadn't mentioned the months of rejection, the constant eye rolls, the way she'd turned intimacy into some rare privilege I had to beg for. No, she'd painted me as the villain, distant, cold, uncaring. Classic victim play. Tell the world about the consequences while hiding the actions that caused them. I ended that call as calmly as I could. "I appreciate your concern," I told her mother. "But this is between my wife and me. If she wants to tell you the whole story, the real story, that's up to her. But I'm not going to defend myself against half-truths." It didn't stop there. Her friends got involved next. I could hear the late-night calls, the hushed tones, the pep talks. And soon, she started parroting their suggestions. "Everyone says we should plan date nights. My friend thinks couples go through rough patches like this. Maybe we should take a vacation together." But every solution they offered was just wallpaper over rotting walls. They wanted to fix the symptoms while ignoring the disease. The problem wasn't that we needed a getaway. It was that she'd lost respect for me, and I'd stopped crawling for it. The breaking point came when she tried to pull my own friends into the mess. She called one of my buddies from work, told him she was worried about me, hinted I was going through some kind of midlife crisis. When he brought it up to me, I laughed. A crisis? I said, "This isn't a crisis, man. This is the first time in years I've actually felt like myself." I told him the truth, not to badmouth her, just to give him the parts she conveniently left out. His response was exactly what I expected. "Good for you, man. About time." That evening, she came storming in, furious that I'd been talking to people about our private business. The irony nearly knocked me over. She'd been dialing everyone she knew, even my friends, spreading her edited version of events, and somehow I was the one crossing lines. "You're right," I said calmly. "Our business should stay private. So maybe stop calling the entire neighborhood looking for backup and start dealing with the real problem." She froze, narrowed her eyes. "And what exactly is the real problem?" 3 months of this, and she was still pretending not to know. I stared at her for a long time before answering. "The real problem," I said, "is that you spent months tearing down your husband's self-respect. And now you're furious that I went and found it again. The real problem is you love all the perks of being married, but none of the responsibility that comes with it. And the biggest problem of all, you're not sorry for what you did. You're just sorry it finally came back to bite you." That night, for the first time in months, she tried to get close to me. But it wasn't out of love, it was panic. She finally understood this wasn't me playing hard to get. This was me being genuinely done chasing someone who had made it painfully clear how little I meant to her. When I gently turned her down, the dam broke. She started sobbing, her voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" she cried. The question just hung there, heavy with months of damage that couldn't be undone. And the truth was simple. What did I want? I wanted her to want me, not out of guilt or obligation, but because she truly did. I wanted her respect. I wanted her to treat me like a husband instead of a burden she barely tolerated. But most of all, I wanted her to realize that you can't spend months tearing something down and then demand it be rebuilt overnight just because you don't like living in the ruins. For once, she was asking the right question, but she was asking it 4 months too late. I sat down across from her and looked her straight in the eye. "What I want," I said slowly, "is for you to understand what you did to us. I want you to see how you turned your husband into a stranger in his own home. And most importantly, I want you to understand that some things can't just be undone because you suddenly don't like the consequences." She opened her mouth to interrupt, but I wasn't finished. "For months," I said, my voice low and steady, "you made me feel pathetic for wanting my own wife. You made me feel like my existence was an inconvenience to you. You turned intimacy into something I had to beg for, and then you acted like I was the problem for wanting it." "I never meant to make you feel that way," she whispered. The classic non-apology. Not "I'm sorry I did that," but "I'm sorry you felt that way." Like my feelings were the issue, not her actions. "Intent doesn't erase impact," I said. "A person can step on your foot by accident, but your foot is still broken. You accidentally destroyed my faith in this marriage. And now you're mad that I'm not limping around pretending everything's fine." That's when the tears turned hot and angry. "So what?" she snapped. "You're just going to punish me forever? Hold this over my head for the rest of our marriage?" There it was, the truth laid bare. She wasn't remorseful. She was just sick of dealing with the fallout of her choices. "Punish you?" I almost laughed. "This isn't punishment. This is protection. There's a difference. Punishment is me trying to hurt you back. Boundaries are me refusing to be hurt again." She cried harder then, not the tears of regret, but the tears of frustration, the tears of someone who realized their old ways of controlling the narrative weren't working anymore. Through her sobs, she choked out, "I just want my husband back. I just want things to go back to how they were," she said through tears. And right there, in that one sentence, was the real problem. She didn't want to fix what was broken. She wanted to rewind time to when she held all the power, when I had none. Back to when she could treat me however she wanted, and I'd swallow it whole, calling it love. I shook my head slowly. "The husband you want back never really existed," I told her. "What you want is the man who would accept disrespect and pretend it was devotion. The man who would beg for scraps of attention from someone who made it clear she didn't care to give them. That man wasn't living. He was dying by inches. And you were the one killing him." She tried a new tactic then, softening her voice, talking about love, about commitment, about working through our problems together. But I'd learned something important over the last few months. Love without respect is just dependence. Commitment without equality is just a cage. And working through problems only works if both people admit the problems are real. Do you love me? She asked, desperation thick in her voice. It was a trap question, and we both knew it. If I said yes, she'd use it to guilt me into crawling back. If I said no, she'd paint me as the bad guy who stopped loving his wife. I love the woman I married, I said carefully, looking her straight in the eye. But I don't recognize her anymore. The woman I married wouldn't have made me feel like an inconvenience in my own home. She wouldn't have treated me like I was a burden just for wanting my wife to want me. She wouldn't have spent months tearing me down and then acted shocked when I finally stood up. She swallowed hard, then asked the question everyone asks when they don't really understand what's broken. What will it take to fix this? So I told her the truth. It's not about you making it up to me. It's about you becoming the kind of person who never would have done this in the first place. And that's not something you fix in a week or a month. That's a whole change in who you are. How long? She asked, voice small. How long do I have to prove myself? And that's when I knew she still didn't get it. She was thinking about it like a punishment, a timeline she just had to survive until I forgave her and things went back to normal. There is no timeline, I said. And there is no going back to normal. Normal was you disrespecting me and me pretending that was love. Normal was broken. What we have now is honest. You're finally feeling what it's like to be treated the same way you've been treating me. She went quiet for a moment, then played her last card. She suggested counseling again, but this time with conditions. She'd already found a therapist, made an appointment, wanted us to commit to working on our marriage. But she wanted a promise from me too, that I'd try to go back to how things were before. I stared at her for a long moment before speaking. I'll go to counseling on one condition, I said. You have to be willing to admit that how things were before was the problem, not the solution. You have to be ready to own the choices you made that got us here. And you need to understand that the goal isn't to fix me back into a man who tolerates disrespect. It's to build something completely new. If you're not ready for that, counseling is just going to be an expensive way to hear truths you don't want to face. The look on her face said it all. She wasn't ready for that kind of accountability. She didn't want counseling to fix us. She wanted it to fix me. She wanted professional validation that I was the overreacting husband, not the man who'd been crushed for months under her neglect. Think about it, I said as I walked past her. Really think about whether you're ready to take responsibility for your part in this. Because if you're not, nothing changes. She retreated to the bedroom again, like always. But this time, it felt different. For once, I think she finally understood that I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't in a phase. I wasn't pulling some stunt to get her attention. I was simply done accepting less than I deserved. And if she couldn't step up, she was about to see what life really looked like without the man she'd taken for granted for so long. The next morning, she left for work without a word. For the first time in our marriage, the silence didn't sting. It felt honest. It wasn't loaded with resentment or fake smiles. It was just the truth hanging between us. I'd said my piece. What she did next was up to her. A week later, she made her choice. She scheduled the counseling appointment and told me she was ready to take responsibility for her actions. But words are cheap, and I was watching her behavior closely. That first session went exactly how I expected. She spent most of the time talking about how I'd changed, how I'd become cold and distant, how I wasn't the man she married anymore. The therapist, to her credit, didn't let it slide. What was happening before this change? She asked. What was going on in your relationship then? And that's when the truth finally started to leak out. Under professional questioning, my wife admitted the months of rejection, the eye rolls, the shutdown of intimacy. But even then, she tried to justify it. Stress from work, exhaustion, feeling overwhelmed. All feelings I could understand, but none of them excused treating your partner like garbage for months. Then the therapist looked at me. How did that treatment make you feel? I didn't hold back. I told her what it was like to be rejected by your own wife over and over. What it's like to feel like a burden just for wanting connection. How it slowly eats away at you until you lose yourself trying to make someone else happy, only to find out they never really cared. When the session ended, the drive home was quiet. But for the first time in a long time, it wasn't an angry, defensive quiet. It was thoughtful. She didn't speak until we were home. And that evening, for the first time in months, she did something different. She apologized. This time, the apology was different. It wasn't that surface level, "I'm sorry you felt that way" line I'd heard before. It was real. She looked me in the eye and said, "I'm sorry I made you feel unwanted. I'm sorry I took you for granted. I'm sorry I turned our marriage into something you had to endure instead of something you wanted to be in." It was the first time she truly acknowledged what she'd done. No excuses, no deflections, just ownership. And as much as I appreciated hearing it, I knew words alone wouldn't rebuild what had been broken. "I appreciate the apology," I told her. "But now you have to show me it means something. Show me that you understand what you almost lost." And over the next month, that's exactly what she did. Not with big, showy gestures meant to sweep everything under the rug, but with quiet, consistent choices day after day. She started putting her phone down when we talked. She initiated conversations about things that mattered. She made an effort to treat me like someone she wanted to be with, not someone she was just stuck with out of obligation. The biggest change showed up in how she approached intimacy. It stopped feeling like a chore, like something she was checking off a list. It felt like she wanted me again, genuinely. And the difference between being wanted and being tolerated? There's no comparison. But here's the thing. I couldn't just flip a switch and go back to how things were. 4 months of finding my own worth doesn't disappear in a few weeks of better behavior. I recognized her efforts. I appreciated every step she took, but I kept my boundaries in place. One night, she looked at me and said softly, "You're still keeping me at arm's length." She wasn't wrong. I am, I admitted, because trust doesn't rebuild overnight. The old version of me would have jumped back in the second you treated me better. But that man also let himself be treated badly. This version of me, he needs to see that the change is real, that it lasts. I could tell it frustrated her sometimes. She wanted instant forgiveness, instant closeness again. But that's not how healing works. Consequences don't vanish the moment someone stops causing the pain. Some wounds take time, even when both people are committed to healing them. 2 months into this new dynamic, something shifted, not in me, but in her. She stopped asking when things would go back to normal and started focusing on making our new normal better than anything we'd had before. She planned real date nights where she was fully present, not glued to her phone. She started dreaming out loud again. Our future, our goals, trips we wanted to take, life we wanted to build. Most importantly, she treated me like a man she'd chosen, not a burden she had to put up with. Respect returned slowly, but it came back because she learned the hard way what happens when you take someone for granted. She'd felt what it was like to be treated with the same indifference she'd given me, and she hated it. More importantly, she finally understood it wasn't random, it wasn't spite. It was the direct result of her own choices. For months after that first confrontation, our marriage wasn't just alive, it was transformed. Not because we went back to the way things used to be, but because we built something new from the ground up. Something rooted in mutual respect instead of one-sided sacrifice. She never again treated intimacy like an obligation. She never again made me feel pathetic for wanting closeness with my own wife. She never again assumed I'd always be there no matter how I was treated, because she'd learned exactly what happens when you treat someone like nothing. Eventually, they start to believe you, and they become nothing to you in return. The man who used to beg for affection was gone. In his place stood someone who knew his worth and wouldn't settle for less. And the woman who once took him for granted? She was gone too, replaced by someone who truly valued what she had and worked every day to deserve it. Some people might hear this story and think what I did was too harsh. They'll say I should have communicated better, tried harder, been more patient. But here's what I learned the hard way. You teach people how to treat you. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for your marriage, is to refuse to accept being treated poorly. My wife learned that treating me like nothing would only lead to becoming nothing to me. It was a brutal lesson, but a necessary one. And in the end, it didn't just save our marriage. It made both of us better. The respect was real now. The intimacy was genuine. The partnership was equal. Because I'd stopped begging for what I deserved and started demanding it through my actions.